Hi, everyone. My name is Vanessa Bowling-Ajavon, and I am the Director of Administration and Human Resources here at HACR. Our next session is the Alliance for Board Diversity Forum, Empowering Corporate Boards Through Diversity. I want to thank you all for joining us and for all your wonderful social media posts about the great comments and takeaways you've experienced today. If you want to join the conversation, make sure to use the hashtag HACR events on all your social posts. Now, I'd like to introduce you to today's moderator, Carey Oven. Carrie serves as a National Managing Partner at Deloitte. Welcome, Carrie.
Thanks, Vanessa, and thank you to HACR for all the coordination on this wonderful event. As the National Managing Partner for Deloitte, we are so pleased to be affiliated with the Alliance for Board Diversity, and I am really glad to bring you some fantastic headliners to talk more around how we empower corporate boards through diversity. So just so you know who you're joined with today, I would actually invite my fellow panelists to just share a moment about themselves as we get into the panel discussion. So first, if you could start us out with just a brief introduction of yourself, that would be great.
Thank you, Carrie. I appreciate that. Of course, sir, everyone, if you're joining us for the first time, my name is Cid Wilson, President and Chief Executive Officer of the Hispanic Association on Corporate Responsibility. We've been around since 1986, and our mission is to advance Hispanic inclusion in corporate America. Looking forward to this great session with my fellow colleagues from the Alliance for Board Diversity.
Hi, everyone. Thank you very much first to Cid and the HACR team for inviting us to be a part of this conversation. My name is Linda Akutagawa, President and CEO of LEAP, Leadership Education for Asian Pacifics, and I'm also currently the chair of the Alliance for Board Diversity Alliance that we have right now, and looking forward to this conversation with you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. How are you? My name is Crystal Ashby, and I'm the Interim President and CEO of the Executive Leadership Council. And Cid and HACR, thank you so much for bringing us all together. The Executive Leadership Council is a membership organization that's comprised of some 800 or so members who represent the CEOs, the Black board directors, and Black C-suite executives. And our mission is to build the pipeline of talent for the next generation of Black executives through leadership and development programs as we continue to excel Black excellence. We're really proud to be here today. Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity to be a part of the panel today. I serve as the CEO of Diversifies Search. We were started in 1974. We are a 45-year-old organization in finding C-suite leaders to lead organizations in both the for-profit and not-for-profit arena. We're a national firm and ranked by Forbes as number 5 in the world. I also serve on the board of Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance, and I previously served on the boards of Kohl's, the retailer, and Hughes Supply prior to it being sold to Home Depot. Pleased to be a part of this session today as we think about board diversity and how do we advance the cause of diverse leaders serving on public and private corporate boards around the globe. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Dale. And finally, Lorainne, can we hear from you as well?
Thank you, Carrie, and also thank you to Cid for this opportunity to be here today. Catalyst is also a member of the Alliance for Board Diversity. We were founded in 1962 with the mission of advancing women in the workplace, and we work with some of the leading corporations and powerful CEOs to accomplish that through providing actionable research and tools that help advance women in their corporations.
So great. Thanks to Lorainne, Dale, Crystal, Linda, and Cid. And again, on behalf of Deloitte, we are so pleased to be associated with all of you as great leaders for what we're doing on diversity with boards. And also very importantly, so I'm pleased to sponsor our past publication around the Missing Pieces report, which was focused on really improving diversity on boards, never more important than now, and will continue to be important in the future. So really look forward to our continuing partnership with you on that important research report. So why don't we just jump right in? I know this team wants to hear through all your leadership. And Cid, I'm going to start with you. First and foremost, you are all members and great contributors of the Alliance for Board Diversity. But why do we even need the Alliance for Board Diversity?
Thank you, Carrie. That's a great question because one thing that is so important for all of our attendees to understand is that this is a movement to improve diversity on corporate boards for people of color and for women. And we can't do this by ourselves. It requires allies. It requires collaborations. It requires sharing best practices on what is working for some groups and some organizations that we may be able to learn from as we do our advocacy. So the Alliance for Board Diversity has been around for 16 years. We were started in 2004, and we have a very strong collaboration among the Alliance for Board Diversity organizations, ACED, Executive Leadership Council, Catalyst, and ELC, and then, of course, working with Diversifies Search and Deloitte, really help us to complement the work that we need to do as a unified group to push for more diversity on corporate boards. But we are stronger together, and that's why we need an Alliance for Board Diversity.
Great, thanks, Cid, and absolutely agree and love the passion that all of the team members bring to this alliance. And again, I love that we are getting the message out in the marketplace. I want to say that we knew it well before the rest of the world actually recognized it. So truly glad to see this partnership come together and really advance what we know is the right cause for boards. So as we think about, again, some of the things that we're seeing in the marketplace, in the world, and some of the trends around board diversity, and by the way, really glad to see that we're having the conversation everywhere as of late. But I would like to ask Dale and then maybe Linda, if you could also comment around what trends are we seeing when it comes to board diversity? And Dale, maybe starting with you, giving your view around what you do for Diversified Search.
Great. Carrie, what we're seeing are a number of trends. First of all, a greater recognition that diverse boards speak to increased performance of corporations' goals and commitment to its shareholders, to its customers, to its communities, and to its overall business. The ROI, the data is there that diverse boards perform better in the marketplace. So a greater recognition of that, number one. Number two, we're seeing boards now recognize that we just can't limit seats on the board to sitting CEOs or sitting CFOs, because as we know, there are not enough people of color and women in those seats to fill those positions. So we're seeing a movement away from requiring sitting CEOs or former CFOs on these board positions to folks who are making an impact at divisional levels, who are making the impact, who've got the business acumen and financial literacy in other areas to serve on those boards, because they will be eminently qualified. They just may not be in the sitting CEO role today. The other trend we're seeing is a movement to create term limits, because at the end of the day, you've got to have room on a board to bring others on. And too often, many corporations still hold on to mandatory retirements at 72, 73. And we want to see more movement of people moving on boards with term limits, so that it frees up board seats for others to come in and to create real impact and opportunity. So I'm encouraged that people are responding to the importance of diversity in results, the importance of not just having sitting CEOs and CFOs in the seats, and the importance of term limits, which creates greater fluidity.
Yeah, thanks, Dale. Absolutely. Seeing results is one, thinking of skills and competencies broadly, absolutely. And then really just understanding that there needs to be opportunity for placement. So love those three. And Linda, I know you're passionate about this topic as well. Any thoughts from your perspective?
Sure, and thanks, Dale, for what you added. I want to just tack on to what he also said. A couple other things that I want to share is, what I'm seeing, and I think we've talked about this within the ABD, is that there seems to be more interest from other, I'll say, stakeholders outside of the boards themselves. So for example, BlackRock, Goldman Sachs, State Street, we're seeing the investor community really looking at the diversity on boards. I think for that reason that Dale stated, that there's a greater recognition that diverse boards bring better performance, better financial performance. And so that is one trend that we're seeing, not going down, but actually accelerating. We're seeing more companies like that stating that they want to see more diverse boards. I think the other part, and we'll talk a little bit more about this later too, but we're seeing that there are what I'll say, policymakers taking interest in this as well too. And a couple that I'll just point out, and they're not necessarily mandating through legislation that there must be diverse boards, but just by the questions that they're asking. They kind of straddle maybe the investor class as well too. So for example, CalPERS and CalSTRS in California and the New York City Comptroller in New York, they're also saying, we're looking at you, we want to see more diverse boards, and whether it's push-pull, we're seeing that as a trend increasing. And I think this is also happening in other states too. We'll talk more about the legislation later.
Yeah, great, Linda. Yeah, we'll definitely pivot back to that. And again, I think really understanding that we're starting to see that broader stakeholder influence really make at least sure that the boards are having discussion on that as they're thinking succession. So as we think about that, and in thinking about some of the progress that we made on actually placing women on corporate boards and seeing a more improvement in terms of gender parity, what we haven't yet seen enough of is actually women of color balancing out that gender parity. So would love to kind of get, and I'll ask both Lorainne and Crystal your views here around what we think we need to do and what needs to happen to really have us see more progress around women of color on board. So Lorainne, let me first start with you, and then Crystal also, I know you have things to add on this topic as well. So Lorainne, would you start on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the numbers talk for itself around women of color on boards. While we're getting close to 25% of women on boards, which is great progress in the last few years. And, frankly, the Focus Me Too movement has really made progress. Women of color only represent 4.6% in our study, even though people of color are getting close to 50% of the U.S. population. So there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. Now, the good news is I think that the heightened focus coming out of George Floyd and just interest in the equity issues has put much more focus and intentionality on this. But there's a lot of hard work to do that, to get rid of the biases, to make sure you have diverse slates, to build a much broader network, and to make sure that we give the women of color the right skill sets so that they can effectively compete for these seats and be part of that network and know how to talk the talk and be part of that boardroom. So, I'm sure Crystal has a lot to add to this, but there's intentionality needs to be done through the Nom and Gov committees and the CEOs, but we also need to do the right type of bringing the women into the networks and educating them on how to be effective in their pursuit.
So thanks for that, Lorainne. I agree with you, but I think there's a couple of things we need to think about as it relates to corporate America and the boards and their obligations and responsibilities. First of all, I think we're in the middle of an awakening. And what usually comes out of the awakening we need acknowledgement. People need to actually own it and say, yes, this is where we are, and we want to see the change happen. And until you actually own the fact that you want the change to happen, you won't see it occur. And then once you do that, you have to start to talk about accountability and who actually has to own this and drive the change that you're looking to see. And once that accountability happens, there are things like ownership, and really, and I think very critically, transparency. You actually have to say what you're going to do what you say you're going to do, measure it, and be clear with everyone, this is the path we're taking. You can't just say, we think we want to increase our diversity, because you have to be intentional about it. And that, I think, is a very critical component and needing to stay the course. But when you talk about Black women, and I think, Lorainne shared, Black women, if you actually look at, for instance, I think it was ThoughtCo did an article recently where it said that Black women are actually the most educated group in the United States. And if that's the case, then they should be represented on these boards. So then why aren't they? I would posit that there's a theory about once you get the seat, what you do with the seat when you have it. And so I would say that our white sisters who were truly the beneficiaries of the diversity move from a gender perspective, They are currently owning the seats. And I think, Carrie, you're the person that used the word allies. I'm asking for accomplices. I want people who are going to step to the line with me, who are going to actually be very clear about that. And I want white women to start saying, when they look around the boardroom, where are our sisters? Where are our sisters of color? Where are the Black women who should be here with us?
Yeah, I love your passion around that, Crystal. And I think it's not only the intention, but the action. And I think it's beyond the talk, but it's also walking that talk. And I love your points around sponsorship. It definitely helped us get there on, or at least part of the way there on the gender parity. Now, again, how do we pay it forward for women of color? So love your comments there. So on that note, though, I do want to come back to Linda. One of the comments you made, and Crystal, I'm sure you'll have a point of view on this as well, which is what actually really do we really think we need, beyond the carrot, do we need the stick? So, what really needs to happen to really put diversification into actually not only intention, but action? Does it require legislation for example, what we saw in California and women on boards? Is it activists getting more involved? Is it the external broader stakeholder influencers like investors demanding it? What are really the methods that we need to create this change? So, maybe Linda, you had started this discussion, so why don't you talk to that point, and then Crystal would love your views as well.
Okay, great. Well, I guess maybe I'll be blunt about this, and some folks who have heard me talk about it know that I can be pretty blunt about it. I think, yes, I think we do need some type of actual legislation. And I say that mostly because power doesn't give up power easily. And as much as we're having all these wonderful conversations about diversity and equity and inclusiveness and belonging in our workplaces, I'll be frank, I mean, we should have seen progress 16 years ago when we started this whole ABD movement. And it's taken us 16 years and we're barely seeing sub-movement actually happening. And I will say that not only just California, where there is now legislation that will mandate diversity, ethnic and race diversity, as well as LGBTQ and veterans diversity. They previously passed SB 826, which mandated gender diversity. We're also seeing in other states, at least 5 other states, there's at least legislation that has been passed encouraging diversity, and then there's other states, at least 6 more that are considering it. But I do believe that we need that kind of activism. I also want to say that there is more efforts underway, and I think Crystal will be able to talk about this, but there's the Board Challenge, there's also Board Diversity Action Alliance. I think there's increasingly more other efforts that are underway to be able to bring to attention the need for greater diversity and at different levers of the process, and being able to, I think, showcase to boards that for any board to say we cannot find people is frankly, means that they're just not trying hard enough. There's plenty of resources out there that I think boards can consult, not just search firms, sorry, Dale, but like ABD, like the Board Challenge, like the Board Diversity Action Alliance. I think there are all these other options out there.
No, I think that's great, Linda, making sure that, again, that intention is there, but followed up by seeking the information to really take action. So, Crystal, what else do you have to add on that one?
I think this is very interesting, and I agree with you. You're absolutely right. In California, legislation has been passed. There are other places that are following. Illinois is following, New York, New Jersey. But I think that what you have to think about is that organizations should actually be proactive in this space. I come out of a regulated industry before I joined ELC. I come out of oil and gas. Regulation is not necessarily the path you want to be on, because the other side of regulation is penalties, et cetera. So this should not require legislation. Linda mentioned ABD, 16 years old. The Executive Leadership Council will be 35 years old next year. And so when you think about it, and you ask companies to look at their return on their investment, you ask them to look at their customer base, you ask them to look at their external stakeholders, there's an ROI there for them. And the data supports the fact that diverse organizations perform more strongly. They are better equipped. their ROI is greater. So you have to be looking at it from that lens. And I think when you talk about, for instance, Linda shared the corporate board challenge, which is asking people to have one Black director by 2021. And they're giving them a specific time frame. Or you talk about the Board Diversity Action Alliance, BDAA, which is to increase diverse representation on corporate boards for directors. And we're starting with Black. ELC is a founding member of BDAA. We're our charter member of the board challenge. Starting with Black directors because they're not there, but it's diversity, it's people of color. But also, I think this is the thing. As you see more organizations being more transparent, again, there's that transparency. As you start to report, self-identify race, self-identify gender, people then are actually questioning and seeing it and are aware of it, and then promote the accountability on the measures on the corporate D&I. So I think that you have to think about, do you want regulation? And yes, we may need it because we're not advancing quickly, but it's something that organizations need to seriously think about.
Yeah, no, I think that's extremely well said. And, we like to hope that we don't need it. However, it may be a bit that we do to really spur that action. And you talked a bit, Crystal, about methods, right? And how do we really kind of think about moving the needle on this, regardless of regulation? What are short-term or long-term methods that we can actually employ to increase diversity on boards? And I'm going to ask Lorainne and maybe Crystal, coming back to you on this, just since you started the conversation on how do we actually invest in some of those methods that really help us increase board diversity over time. So Lorainne, can I start with you on that?
There is a multi-pronged approach, and we already talked about a number of them. There are things like term limits or even adding seats to boards, because frankly, in the Fortune 500, there just is not that much turnover. So even if 50% of the seats are filled by diverse candidates, it's still going to take a very long time. But one of the programs that Catalyst has, our Women on Board program, is a sponsorship program. We talked about how important sponsorship is. So what we do is we have experienced board directors and sitting CEOs who have the network in place sponsor first-time diverse candidates, and we're particularly focused on women of color. And they go through a 2-year process of helping them understand, what it takes, how they position themselves, and then opening up their network so that they can get these seats and make them available. Another thing I do want to mention, since I spent my career in Silicon Valley and did a number of startups, is I was very excited when David Solomon talked about the fact that he wasn't going to take a company public unless they had a diverse candidate. And that's so critical because, the natural thing is, you have some a startup CEO, he brings his friends on, and when they go public, they just ask for more of their friends. Well, they need to understand that this is important for business, it's important for the investor community, because they are seeing that this is something that that is important for business. And that they're forced to really broaden the network and systematically and with intentionality to do it. I think a bit of this, the stick is going to help them really focus.
No, I think that's great. And you're right. There's so many of the board placements that happen through that sponsorship, through that network. But it needs to have that willingness of opening up that aperture to think broadly and then pull others along. So Crystal, would love your views on that as well. Again, other methods that we can employ, both shorter term, long term, other investments that we need to make to get this very visible in the board succession process.
So, it's interesting. I think you have to start by looking at what's the data telling you. So if you look, I think Black Enterprise did a study in 2019, 37% of the S&P 500s did not have a Black director on their board of directors, which was only a 2% increase from the prior year. And then if you go and you look at the data from the Harvard Law School Forum on Corporate Governance, in 2019, approximately 8%, in 2019, only 10% of the Russell 3000 index had a diverse board director, which was up 3% from 2008, from 8%. So 11 years, it only moved 3%. So if you look at that data, that is appalling if you actually look at the breakdown of the diversity in America. So our boards do not represent the people that they serve. There's a lot of conversation around, I can't find the directors, I can't find the diverse directors. The problem is you're not expanding your networks. If you consistently look for people in the places you have historically looked for them, nothing's going to change for you. So if you're talking to the gentleman that you've been on the board with for years, you're going to continue to get those people. So you have to broaden where you look. You have to expand your network. You have to recognize that the talent that you're seeking isn't sitting right in front of you. So how do you do that? The Executive Leadership Council, much like Lorainne was talking about the program they have for women at Catalyst, we have a program called our Corporate Board Initiative, which prepares people to be ready for boards at that point in time. So when the call happens, I think you have to continue to look at different skill sets. If you say, I want a sitting or former CEO, well, there are only 3 sitting black male CEOs in the Fortune 100, the Fortune 500 rather. And then you have Ken Chenault, who's retired, and others. Well, they're all oversubscribed, so you can't have them. You have to accept the fact that if that's the criteria for someone who's diverse, you're never going to get there. So now you have to start to look at other talent skills. Are you looking for someone who's in the risk field? Are you looking for someone who has operations? Are you looking for someone that's done mergers and acquisitions, since there seems to be an opposition to lawyers? What are you trying to get? So how do you prevent the homogenous environment that you're in? You go to other sources to find the talent that you're looking for.
I'd like to just add a little bit to that, if you don't mind. I'm actually myself have decided, I'd like to get on a corporate board. So I've been in the middle myself in this. And the interesting thing is that when you talk to women of color who are highly qualified in your mind, they're all wondering how they can get on a board. Well, I find this really interesting because there's a broad set of really qualified talents there, but the people who are looking for the boards don't think they exist. So it really has to do with this network and sponsorship, because there are a lot of talented women, there are a lot of talented people of color who are more than capable, who are interested in being on boards, but they're hiding in plain sight, and we need to solve that problem.
And Carrie, I think that Linda raised a point when she talked about not wanting to cede the power.
Interesting, yeah.
To what Lorainne just said.
And again, and outside of holding the seat, how do you support others for the seat? Totally under.
Yeah, Carrie, if I might add just one
Sid,
thing, is that one of the things that what we do that's very unique, because part of this is changing the actual board culture. The culture of not having to go to the person to your left or to your right who may not be diverse and tell me, who do you know? Because we know that there's a good chance that if they go to just their own networks, their networks are not likely going to be diverse. So they're going to continue to recommend other board directors who are not diverse. One of the things also that, as I said, we do very unique, and I know many of our ABD members do, is that we actually buy shares in companies, because in this time when we're talking about voting rights, we're talking about the other kind of voting rights, and that is the voting shareholder rights, because we know that when you are talking as a shareholder and you are calling for more diversity, it gets a lot of weight when you're talking as a shareholder, because you have the power to vote in or vote out board directors if you feel that there is not enough diversity. So working with some of our institutional investors and the institutional companies that are large shareholders, and telling them that they need to call on their companies where they own large shares to increase their diversity on their boards, which is why it's so important that we partner with the Wall Street Journal and CNBC and all these other major outlets that where the institutional investors are reading, so that they know that we are continuing to advocate for more diversity, and they need to do that too as institutional investors.
So Cid, I think that's very compelling, and I actually want to pull on that thread a little bit, because there's a question coming in on the Q&A. And by the way, audience, please, if you have questions for this esteemed panel, please enter into the Q&A. But Cid, just want to, again, pull on that thread. How do you really suggest that we reach boards directly on this issue There's a comment in the Q&A that basically said that you may have strong executive level support for diversity on your board, but might have limitations on what the executive team feels their role is to influence the board to make decisions around diversity in the boardroom. So can you maybe talk a little bit about your perspectives? And then Dale, I'd also like you to comment on what you're doing around Diversified Search to, again, get this topic more prevalently in the boardroom. So Cid, if you could start on that, that would be great.
Well, the one thing about corporate boards is that they're public. We all know who the board directors are. We know their backgrounds, and sometimes we may know them because they're employed elsewhere. And so sometimes it's a matter of those outreaches that we have to do to call on those board directors to be champions. And I think it's important that as we continue to do that, company by company, industry by industry, then we can begin to move the needle. There's no question that there are a lot of challenges in terms of the lack of not only term limits, but also sometimes a lack of movement that happens with these boards. And these are some things that we do. I love what Crystal said earlier in this, where she said she's not looking for allies, she's looking for accomplices. I couldn't agree more. I think that it's not just saying that I support diversity and inclusion. I want a champion of diversity and inclusion. Someone that is going to say that if there is no diversity on this board, that I will be that champion to call for that change. And we need corporate America to do that more. We can do that through our advocacy. We can do it through the media. We can also do it at the annual shareholder meeting as shareholders.
Well, I know we have a ton of champions here on this panel, but I do want to go back to Dale. Again, Dale, given your work in the search in particular, are a couple of things? A few questions that have come in are more around, how do diverse candidates get in that ecosystem and get in that network? And also, how are we better getting direct skills-based approach into the boardroom outside of maybe the more traditional or I'll say more antiquated dynamic around what boards look for? Could you maybe talk a little bit about that, Dale?
Sure. And Carrie, and as has already been stated, we're in a watershed moment here in this country, given all that we've experienced over the last 6 to 8 months, where there's a clarion call for boards to move forward around diversity and inclusion. And what we have today that we didn't have 15, 20 years ago is a level of transparency that comes through social media and through other means where we can monitor the progress of organizations in terms of this area. We have an advisory board at Diversified Search made of corporate directors, men and women who are diverse, who bring diverse perspectives and help us leverage the impact of this in the boardroom. For example, one of our advisory board members, Barry Williams, who's African-American, has put together a corporate challenge to the Business Roundtable and to other entities around the country, asking them to sign a pledge to increase the board diversity by X number of people. And so this is what we're doing through our network of advisory board members, as well as our affiliation with ABD, with HACR, with the Latin Corporate Directors Group, with ELC, with LEAP and others, because we believe that directors don't just come through search firms, they come through these networks that are out there that have to educate people around board service. But it's also important for individuals who desire to serve on boards to be in the networks of search firms and in the networks of affinity organizations that have influence and carry moral suasion into the boardroom, so that when people do say, well, who do you know or where do you go, that we need to make sure that our profiles are linked in, no pun intended, into places where they know where we are, so that we don't just go to the usual suspects, but we find people who, through conventional wisdom, are also talented and available and resourceful and need to be in these networks so that we know where they are to be able to put them forward for board service.
No, I think that's great, Dale. And having heard a recent discussion with Barry Williams, he also said, don't think people are just sitting around waiting to get you on a board, that you actually do need to be assertive, get connected in with that network, connected in with the search like what you do with Diversified Search. So loved those remarks there. And actually, that was a question that specifically came in on our Q&A, which is how do you get into those networks? So I would actually offer that to all the panelists. What do you see as successful techniques that our diverse candidates are employing to actually get in those networks beyond just the traditional search?
Having been a salesperson all my life, it's really like sales. You need to write down all the people that you know. You need to get your board bio specifically focused on what are the skills that boards are looking for, and that's different than a standard resume. It's, you need to understand what boards, they're looking for technology, they're looking for people to sit on certain committees, they're looking to fill out a structure and a matrix that they might have, and then you've got to put that together, and then you've got to list everyone who might know someone who can help you get on a board. And, you never know, but you've got to go out and you've got to prospect and get yourself known out there so that when the opportunity comes, they're thinking of you. That includes, the search firms, but not, obviously, we've been talking about for a long time, only about 20% of the boards in the U.S. go through search firms. It's really through word of mouth. So you got to get out to the people who know and can and are in the know about board opportunities. So those are people sitting on boards or on generally and are talking to people who sit on boards.
No, I think
Carrie, just one. I'll give a quick piece of advice. So this will be super quick because this is a 30-second answer for what would normally be like a 45-minute talk with just this question alone. But I tell all of our corporate partner and all of the attendees, find a nonprofit where you have board directors who also serve on a corporate board. If you're on a nonprofit and there's no one on that nonprofit board that serves on a corporate board, your chances of getting identified is zero. So work with your company. Get them to sponsor you on this board so that you can meet that give-get. And then when you get into that network, find out who serves on their board and network with them, because if they got on their first board, within 2 years, they're going to get asked to serve on the second board. And then within about another year, they're going to ask for the third board. And they're going to turn down that third board seat. And then they're going to say, well, I can't do this third board, but I know Crystal or Dale or Lorainne or Linda or Carrie or any of you, and I'll nominate you on those boards. So a very quick way to do that, but you can do that through your company and then identify that nonprofit that has corporate boards serving on that nonprofit board.
Actually, I want to jump in on that just for some additional thoughts on what Cid just said. One, I think given that we probably have a range of different levels of people on this session right now. One, if you're, let's just say early to mid-career, I would just encourage you to just get onto a nonprofit board. Think about what you're passionate about. Think about what is interesting to you. And then find ways to get involved and engaged on a nonprofit board, because you're not going to get onto the kind of nonprofit boards like the big ones like what Cid just talked about with zero experience on a board. You're going to have to get some experience somewhere, and then from there, use that to build up your network to the next size board. If you're a corporate executive, you've never served on a board, you may be able to, but the likelihood is that most large nonprofit boards where you're going to be interacting with other board directors and those that also sit on publicly traded boards, those are going to be like your hospital boards, your kind of like music society, music center, museum boards, university boards, and they're looking oftentimes for people with some basic level of experience first. So for those of you who are earlier, get that experience first. If you're an executive, find a way to get onto some type of what I would call starter board, so you could get that experience under your belt and then get onto some of those bigger boards. Some boards will take you if you have no experience, if you're going to be able to bring the give-get. Let's just be frank. The give-get is going to be an important part, and I think that that's important. But they are looking for diverse directors, and I think that's a fabulous place to start building out your network.
Well, and I would go ahead, Crystal. I know you wanted to make a remark on that as well.
I just want to do a little bit of a pivot to say I agree with everything everyone has said, but I also think it's critical for you to be prepared for what it means to be on a board. And so I think there is a lot of homework that has to be done leading up to what it really means to sit in the governance seat. So you don't want to actually have someone be interested in you and then you not really understand what that means. So while you're trying to do the networking, while you're trying to do all the engagement, There's a huge piece around the education and learning that you can do so that when opportunity hits, you are prepared for it. So I just would add that to the piece around the networking, the conversation, the discussions, the 30-second speech, understanding what it means to be on the Nom and Gov committee, understand what it really means to be on audit. Get all of this together so that you make sure you are prepared if that opportunity hits.
Well, I wish we had 45 more minutes to talk about this topic, and I do want to just thank this great panel, Dale, Lorainne, Linda, Cid, and Crystal. You guys are just so fantastic to moderate with such a great topic. I need to turn it over to Vanessa before she gives us all the hooks. So Vanessa, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie, and thank you to all of our panelists. I want to let you know that the work we do would not be possible without our sponsors. So today, our sponsor, Target, has a brief video to show you.
Hi guys, this is my Target store.
Just because there's a lot going on, it doesn't mean that we can't celebrate those big moments.
It's a boy.
We're all here with the common goal of bringing joy to our guest life, to our life. It's all really connected.
Thank you so much to Target. And this has been a great day of programming. I hope you have all really enjoyed it. But there is one final session before our networking Hora Feliz, and that is the CEO Roundtable, moderated by CNBC's Bertha Coombs. I'm looking forward to a great session, and I hope you are too. It's starting momentarily, so I will see you there.